Hey everybody, this is Greg with Medical Muscle. And one of you made a good point. Is it worth it going to a Caribbean medical school? What are the downsides? What are the possible upsides? Okay? And I'm going to talk specifically about St. George University because that's where my experience is from. So this doesn't apply to all Caribbean schools, but I'm going to try to clarify some things. So let's talk about some obvious downsides, right? What's the obvious downsides? Well, the obvious downside is that you're going to a school that does not have the same standards of like MCAT scores or GPA scores or say extracurriculars that some of the other US schools have, okay? So what that means is if you go to a US Caribbean school, that potentially you were not a great student in your undergrad or, your four-year college, or your MCAT score was shit. In my case, I had a little bit of both. And not a crazy amount of medical experience getting into this. So on paper, I didn't look like a fantastic student, but I understood that. Okay, that's fine with me. But I have to say, that does not mean, and I'm going to clarify this, that does not mean that all the students follow that same path. At St. George University, there are a ton of students who had decent MCAT scores, good, could get into US medical schools, had great GPAs, had great experience, and are crushing it in school right now. But for some reason or another, either, these other candidates at these other programs were just a little better, or maybe they fit the diversity better, or maybe their interview was better. Who knows? And in that interview, or even your letter that you sent out to these medical schools, maybe there was just something that they didn't like about it, or that the other applicants just had it a little better, put together a little better. It doesn't mean that the Caribbean student wouldn't have dominated at the US school. It's just that they just didn't fit exactly what that medical school was looking for. It could be a bunch of things. And it could come down to something stupid like you just didn't jive with the interviewer. I mean, in my medical interviews at some of the US schools, there was one guy that I just didn't jive with. He just didn't really want to have the interview. He seemed burned out. He seemed tired. And what was funny, this is just funny, he was a St. George University student. Who would have guessed? So you never know. You never know. Now, yes, though, at the Caribbean schools, like one that I went to, there are definitely students who are in the other ballpark where, they didn't look good on paper and they're struggling in Caribbean schools because they're just not good students. They may not be cut out for this. That's one part. Maybe they're forced into it and they really don't like it. Maybe that's why they're not putting in all this effort, Maybe their family's making them do this. Maybe they're not a U.S. citizen. That's another thing. They're great students. They have great experience. They had good scores, but it's just another thing that medical schools don't necessarily want to take on is, a foreign graduate or someone who doesn't have a U.S. residency or U.S. Citizenship. So, whatever the reasons, okay, that's another reason. In my case, okay, so on paper, I looked like shit. But I knew I was a hard worker. I had really kicked ass the last few years of my college career. I just gave it my all. I was working a lot. I had a job at that time. So on paper, yes, I didn't look that great. But if you looked at the trend, I was excelling. It just didn't look great. But once I got in, yes, I kicked ass. And I'm kicking ass currently. So don't be dejected if a Caribbean school is your only option. So another thing too, and this one kind of irks me a little bit, just a tiny bit, is that some of these excellent students who would have been able to get into a U.S. school only did one round and only applied to just a few schools. And I think they just kind of gave up in the application process because it is very draining. It's draining to go to these interviews. It's draining to fill out all these forms. It's draining to spend all this money. When you don't get in, say if you only applied to like 5 to 10 schools and you don't get into any of those, some people just give up, okay? And they end up just going to the Caribbean schools because they can get in and they want to start earlier. I would say if you're in that ballpark, apply again. U.S. medical schools tend to have an in, right? You're almost guaranteed a residency. And it's a little easier for you to get a residency than an IMG student. I'm not going to lie. That is the truth. I think some students are young and they just want to get this over with. And they would have probably gotten to a U.S. school if they tried, but for some reason they just wanted to get things moving. So that's another reason. The school itself, St. George. I can't talk for all Caribbean schools, but for St. George, their standard is just as high as any U.S. school, okay? Because they push us. They want us to pass step. They want us to find residencies, right? So they're going to push you the same way as any other medical school. One downside is, say if you're not a great student and you really shouldn't be in medical school, well, they're going to take you on, giving you the chance. And if you end up not doing well, then you may have to retake a term. You may drop out. They still get paid. Okay, so that's, kind of the bargain that you're making with these type of schools is that they're going to give you a chance. They're going to give you the chance. But at the expense of not weeding you out for your own benefit. You might need some people need to be weeded out for their own benefit so that they don't take out this huge loan when this is not really what they're suited for, but I think more what they actually want to do. Because I think if you really want to do medicine, you're going to do well in medicine. If you don't really like it, I feel like people just do worse because it's just not something that you're passionate about. And it's hard to get up and study something that you're just not into, okay? And some people realize that. Hopefully they realize that earlier than later. For me, I enjoyed it every single time, even though it was torturous. And as I go, I'm enjoying it more and more and more. But that's not always the case, right? So taking out this huge loan to go to school has been fine because, this is definitely something that I see all the way through. I see myself going all the way through. Some other downsides going to a Caribbean school is that it's the prestige. If you go to a U.S. school, especially certain U.S. schools, obviously, there's a prestige that's with that. So when you're applying to residencies, people know the name of what school that you went to. Coming from a Caribbean school, there's the connotation that, yes, you could have been a bad student, potentially. They're not going to necessarily look back at your, undergrad grades. They're going to look at your medical school grades. But just that alone can maybe put you at a little disadvantage. You're maybe losing connection with other people who can maybe get you an in. Who is more important than I realized. Okay, so it's more like the connections when you're in a U.S. program, especially if the school that you go to has a residency program. That's an awesome situation that we don't get to have necessarily because we're not students of that residency, right? So like from the hospital that I'm at right now, the clinical rotation site, there are students that are of that hospital and they basically have an in. Okay, so they're gonna get a residency pretty much regardless of how they do. I mean, obviously they gotta pass these tests, but that's the downside. So that means that as a Caribbean student, you got to excel. You got to make sure that you stand out, okay? It's not impossible. Not at all. No, it's just as long as you have killer scores, you reach out to people, you find good mentors, you find good people around you to, make connections. Get really good letters of rec. Make sure that people get to know you while you're at the clinical sites. All that can make a huge difference, in your ability to get a residency. It's got to be on you to make these things happen. And they will. If you try, it'll happen. If you don't do anything and you just kind of sit around and, you get good test scores or decent test scores, but you don't really put yourself out there, you're at a disadvantage. Okay, so there's another point. Now, talking about the students who are excellent in the Caribbean school, who would probably have done well in a U.S. school, but for some reason didn't get in, and the students that probably shouldn't be in medical school, either they're not a great student and they're gonna struggle the whole way through, or they don't really want to be in medical school. That's definitely part of that group too. It's on you to find the group that you need to be in. And I really suggest from the very beginning, you make friends with the students who want to excel, who this is their passion and this is what they want to do. Early on, from the very first day, I was making friends with the people who just happened to be A students, okay? I wasn't necessarily looking out because some of them, we hadn't taken any tests yet, so we didn't know, how we were all doing, but it just so happened that over time, those are the people that I stayed connected with. And I think that's really important. Not that I don't have friends who have kind of struggled through the whole process. They're decent people. But like if there was other things other than their grades, like say they just wanted to party more, or, they like to not study, it was just hard for us to make a connection because, we have less in common. Our goals are maybe not quite lined up. So I want you to find people that line up with your goals. And your main goal should be to, get an awesome residency and become an awesome doctor. So I really want you guys to do that. In these Caribbean schools, especially in St. George, our class is huge. So, find these people. They're out there. And it'll come, I'm not going to say that you have to look. It'll come organically. If you are that kind of person, you're going to link up with those type of people. All right. Find the people that support you and, give you insight. And, you share information with each other. You're going to share, hey, have you looked at this one thing that can help with your residency or something like that? You make those connections and you share it back and forth. You find something and share with them, so you guys help each other. You kind of give each other hints on how to progress through this huge maze of, medicine, at this stage of medicine. So, all in all, is a good idea. It's been a good idea for me in my case because I applied to a ton of schools. One of my clients, when I was a personal trainer, helped me apply to a lot of schools. I applied to every single school, medical school. I applied to, I'm going to say, about 80 schools, and I didn't get into any of them. I got a few interviews, but it wasn't looking good. So for me, this was really the only other option I had, and it made sense. But if you are a good student, you think you can do well on another round of interviews, do it, okay? But the benefit of St. George, although it's pretty expensive, it's a private school and it's a for-profit, they have fantastic scholarships, okay? I'm just putting that out there. It was great. It took a huge chunk of my loan down. So although it was a little probably more expensive, it ended up dropping the loan so much that it was cheaper than one of the places that I had actually interviewed at, right, in the U.S. So, that's just another thing to consider. And the other benefit of being in a Caribbean school, not going to lie, 2 years on a Caribbean island is not too bad. It's beautiful there. You can find relatively cheap housing, next to a beach, with great food, nice people. So that's not bad at all, right? Some of the other schools, one of them was out in the middle of nowhere that I had interviewed at. There was a high crime rate, and it was pretty depressing. So I'm very happy that I went to the Caribbean instead. But That's it. And then, the last little detail, I've said this in another video, on your step scores, you do have to do just slightly better. You have to be a few points above what the average US student needs to have. And if you're a non-citizen and an IMG student, an international graduate, you have to have just a tick more. It's not a crazy amount, but it's enough that it's, you have to consider that. It's 1 or 2 points more on your step score. So just kill it. Just kill it on all your tests. So if you end up getting to a Caribbean medical school, just make sure to put all your effort out into this, really focus on the material. They're really trying to train you well, and you'll kick ass, okay? All right, guys, I hope you guys kick butt, and I wish you the absolute best of luck.